Ladies and gentlemen, kicking off the first stop on his world tour, our new president and prophet, Russell M. Nelson! You say you want some revelation, well, here you go. It's gonna blow your freaking mind.
Welcome back to the Mormon News Roundup, the show that brings you the latest and greatest about LDS news. Today we're diving into all the different ways that you can stay informed about Mormon happenings, whether you prefer official sources, church-friendly podcasts, or more critical perspectives. We'll explore popular options like the Mormon News Cast, the Cultural Hall Show, This Week in Mormons, the Church News, Deseret News, KSL, and Generally Unquotable. We are only going to cover programs that are dedicated to LDS news and not programs which occasionally cover the news. We will give you the pros and cons of each program. I'm your host, Steve A's, and that's talent on loan from Kolob. Stick around to find out where to get your LDS news fix. Get on with it! The Cultural Hall Show is a weekly LDS-related news show willing to talk about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from a believer standpoint, helping you to not feel alone, helping to answer questions you may not even know that you had. Whether it's temple, garments, religious, cultural, general conference, prophet, all things to do with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The Cultural Hall Show is hosted by Richie Stedman. Richie describes himself as an entertainer, a DJ, a host, a podcast consultant, a Latter-day Saint, and the future mayor of Taylorsville, Utah. Let's talk about the pros first. The Cultural Hall podcast is an incredibly consistent program, with Richie recording almost 1,000 episodes. It's an upbeat show that has a positive tone, and it's hard not to like Richie. He's a nice guy at heart.
Boring!
Let's talk about the cons. The video portion of this podcast is like a 2018 high school Zoom class. Now, Richie co-hosted episode 63 of the Mormon News Roundup, and that's a really weird story that I'm going to tell you here for the first time. 2 hours before Richie and I recorded our episode for the Mormon News Roundup, he released this little episode on the Cultural Hall podcast. Let me play a clip of it for you.
I'm going to be, and I'll share this in the next episode when it's actually done in case something doesn't happen. I'm going to be guesting on an LDS news podcast. And here is what I will tell you about what I anticipate from this experience. This person takes it a lot more serious than we do.
What?
Yeah.
Surely not.
Well, here's the deal. I mean, I take it serious. I love the community that we've created. I love the openness. I feel like we disperse really
relevant stories.
Yeah, relevant, interesting. I think that we do a good job. I think that there's lots of different sides that are represented by different members within the Cultural Hall. So all of those things, right? But he had the pre-recording call with me, and I was like, "What are we doing?
What the heck?
What is happening right now?" And went down through an agenda, and I was like, "What? You mean you don't just look at a
You're
thing
like, do you not know me but at all?"
Yeah. And then it was a discussion of like, what's the most important? Now, here's the deal. Kudos, because I'm betting it's gonna go very smoothly and very great. But like, there was mention of like, and then I'll make this joke here, and I'm like, no, don't tell me the joke now. I don't want to have to try hard tomorrow to think that that's funny or different or whatever the thing may be.
I can just hear it. The guy says the joke, and there's Richie. Ha 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 ha.
Yeah, the manufactured laugh. Now I'll give him the laugh. I know what it's like to tell a joke and not have anyone laugh. So I'll do that. But
that's exhausting.
Well, and here's, 60 to 90 minutes. It's great. There's a lot of news that in most of the stories we'll talk about here, you and I, and joining us in the second half for actual articles of news will be Chow. That is Charmaine from down around Austin. She's just dropping her kid off at the dance. Then she'll be, not the dance, I guess, at dance. That's a different thing. She'll be joining us. But I mean, I like it. I welcome it. I'm excited to be able to, to share that.
And which podcast is it?
I'm not telling until it's done.
Oh, that's fair.
Because I want to make sure it actually happens. I don't want to be like, hey, go. It didn't happen. It didn't work out.
You don't want them to be like, well, we had that pre-recording call with Richie and we scrapped it.
Oof, boy, that guy.
What the heck?
Well, that was awkward. Richie never did mention his guest appearance on his next podcast episode, even though he said that he would. He also refused to say the name of the Mormon News Roundup. Instead, he just said an LDS News podcast. Maybe it's that whole Mormon major victory for Satan thing. Not sure. And Richie said that the Mormon News Roundup is just far too serious of an endeavor for his comedic tastes. Yeah, it's really, really serious stuff around here, folks. No jokes, all business. This podcast absolutely sucks. Thanks for pointing that out, Richie.
Are you joking?
And Richie also said that different sides are represented on the cultural hall. Richie, that's just not true. You don't have an ex-Mormon side to your podcast, just a faithful side. Nice try, Chief.
Nice try.
And Richie went out of his way to mock the pre-recording call that I usually have with co-hosts. I guess according to him, that's Bush League. You know, I would hate to make sure that we are all on the same sheet of music about what's going to happen when a guest comes onto the show, especially if they're coming on for the first time. Now, how many people have a pre-recorded call, an outline of agenda, practice the jokes, and then just back out at the last minute? I'm not sure about that. I guess I'm just not the professional that Richie is.
You're a professional. I'm a professional.
And Richie and his co-host just refuse to say my name for some reason. It's really odd. They won't say the name of the podcast. They won't say my name. They refer to me as this person, that guy, or the guy. And Richie's co-host, she decided to pile on, mocking me in the Mormon News Roundup, even though she had no idea what Richie was talking about or who he was referring to or the entire situation or what the Mormon News Roundup was, but she felt the need to pile on. Nice job there, co-host.
Great job, babe.
Now, I am not the professional that Richie is. I haven't done DJing. I haven't worked for BYU Productions. I don't have 1,000 episodes of a podcast. But when it comes to introducing guests, when it comes to trying to generate excitement for a podcast, I try to build my guests up and tell my audience that you are going to have a fantastic episode. If you listen to our next episode, we've got so-and-so coming on. It's going to be a fantastic episode, and I do hope that you turn in. I guess those elementary tactics are just too rudimentary for Richie Stedman. And one last thought about the Cultural Hall podcast. Even though once upon a time, Richie, he was an ex-Mormon. He was excommunicated from the church and he joined back up. He has never had an ex-Mormon on his show to co-host after 1,000 episodes. Sadly, this is all too common in the Mormon podcasting world. It's a double standard that I've come to know very well. I can invite him on the Mormon News Roundup and he will come on, but apparently I will never be invited back onto his show. Though I'm still open to the invite, but perhaps this time, Richie, you can just leave the poisoning of the well behind. Call me, Richie. Oh, wait, was that too serious? Next up is This Week in Mormons. This Week in Mormons is a podcast and blog focused on Latter-day Saint news and culture. It was founded way back in 2010, and it has been on the forefront of exploring the good and not so good things about Latter-day Saint life. It aims to do so with a thoughtful analysis and good humor. It's the longest running LDS news-related podcast in this area.
Okay.
This Week in Mormons is hosted by Jeff Openshaw, who is the editor-in-chief, producer, and host of This Week in Mormons, a prominent Mormon news program. This Week in Mormons also has a wide variety of different hosts, including the Twim sisters. Now, I emailed the founder, Jeff, a bunch of times regarding doing collaborations, but he won't return my emails. Even though we literally live close by to one another here in Northern Virginia, he won't share his further light and knowledge with me. Hashtag sad heaven. Well, that won't stop me from inviting Brother Openshaw once again onto the Mormon News Roundup right now. The pros of This Week in Mormons, honestly, I'm struggling with the pros here. I remember tuning into This Week in Mormons for the first time in April of 2022 when I stepped back from daily Sunday church attendance. I was hoping to hear the latest news and intrigue in the world of Mormonism. Instead, what I got was some update on some sister's bake sale and some other hosts' friends' exciting baby shower reports. I'm sorry, that's just not my cup of tea. Programs like this directly led to me founding the Mormon News Roundup. As far as the cons are concerned, the video portion of This Week in Mormons is quite underwhelming. I remember listening to an episode of Twim right after the Bombshell, Arizona AP sex abuse story broke in the summer of 2022 to see how they would cover it. They only spent a couple of minutes on this incredible bombshell national scandal that dominated that week's news, but they managed 15 minutes on the BYU Alumni Magazine food selections. This tells you everything you need to know about what you will encounter when you listen to this whitewashed LDS news podcast.
That's not right.
Let me play one clip that's going to give you everything that you need to know about This Week in Mormons.
And everyone should know that Melissa knows this about me. If you disagree with me politically, you should never feel like that would bother me, because I don't often agree with myself politically.
Yep, that's true.
I change my mind quite frequently about these kinds of things. I think that there are like important principles that I kind of stick to, but in terms of like the nitty gritty, I change my mind all the time on politics.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. Okay.
Okay. Elizabeth N writes, why are they still on this podcast when they give out misinformation?
Who, us?
Well, this one is specifically about us.
Okay,
we give out misinformation so often. Pause.
Okay.
It's true. Listen, we've never promised to be the most accurate podcast out there. We're the best podcast. We just say we're the best.
Yeah.
We don't say we're the most accurate. If you want accuracy, go to ChatGPT. Go to.
Okay.
No.
Listen, we're not a news podcast. If we're being honest, it's This Week in Mormons. But what this podcast is me and my brother talking about things the same way that you and your brother might talk about things, or you and your friend, or you and the other person who goes to church with you. We do not edit things out, right?
We don't.
We say dumb things all the time.
Yeah.
And Matt, like you referred to, a lot of times we change our mind after we've said it. We're just having a conversation. And so, we're not 100% correct all the time. And a lot of times we're kind of rushing through stories. We don't have time to look at everything from every angle. And sometimes we're just talking quickly and we say something we don't mean. Maybe, Elizabeth, you said something you didn't mean. Like, we're talking out of our butts and we're killing people. Are we actually killing you? No, we're not. It's just something people say in conversation. We say things in conversation sometimes. We hope you'll understand that this is a conversation between us.
What was that?
You can't make this stuff up, folks. This Week in Mormons, not the most accurate podcast. Well, you heard it from the hosts themselves. Far be it for me to disagree. And they literally said, we're not a news podcast. This is not a highly edited clip. I just put one stream of consciousness together. They said they're not a news podcast. Okay, I agree with you. We're 2 for 2 on that. And they don't edit anything. It's just a random string of consciousness by hosts who don't even care if they're being accurate. And the host also said, we say dumb things all the time. I tune into podcasts where I want to learn something, where I want to grow, where I don't have to worry about the accuracy of the hosts, where I can find the further light and knowledge that the Father was supposed to send to me. I don't want to listen to a podcast where the hosts just say dumb things all the time. Again, I'm not making this up. I'm not putting words into their mouth. You're hearing it from them themselves. And they said they change their mind after they say things. So what is the point of the podcast? I want people who have solid, well-reasoned opinions, who have given consideration to the topics at hand. You won't find that from This Week in Mormons. And they said that they just rush through the stories. I guess they don't read them very deeply and they don't consider things very deeply. This is an incredibly superficial podcast. And finally, you cannot make this stuff up. She said that they just talk out of their That's what you're going to get with This Week in Mormons. Shaking my head. Next up is Generally Unquotable. Generally Unquotable is the one-stop shop for daily Mormon news, and it's hosted by Megan. Now, aside from the Mormon News Roundup, Generally Unquotable is my favorite LDS news program. There's a lot of pros here. Megan gives it to you down and dirty. She gives you high-powered, short news takes in a quick manner. It's really easy to listen to. And she does so in a very compressed time frame. She gets a bunch of articles out in a short amount of time, and I value that greatly since I have a short attention span. Now, Megan is fair and mostly down the middle. And she's just likable. I mean, you can listen to her for a long period of time. You know, she's also agreed to come on to the Mormon News Roundup, and I'm greatly looking forward to that episode. When she launched Generally Unquotable, Megan hit the ground running, and she's gotten better and better. You know, she's probably going to siphon away some of the viewership of this podcast, and rightfully so. Now, as far as the cons are concerned, I'm really stretching here, but she doesn't ever have any guests on the program, and sometimes the delivery is just a little bit dry, and her webcam and microphone, they do need a little bit of upgrading. But I'm a big fan of Generally Unquotable. I'll link to her in the show notes. Go ahead and give her a listen and tell her that D-Bay sent you when you go over there.
Will do.
Our next podcast that covers LDS news is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints official publication, which is the Church News. It's jointly published by the Deseret News and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, as far as pros are concerned, the Church News shorts in particular are top quality. They really are excellent. Here, let me share one of them with you as an example. The Church News YouTube feed is a high-quality production with influential guests who simply won't go on to any other platform. In some ways, they have a monopoly, and it's because of their softball discussions. They can get general authorities of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who are too scared to go anywhere where they might be asked a difficult question, so they end up on the Church News podcast.
Maybe they are scared.
Now, it is, again, the only officially produced church news-related podcast that's out there. As far as cons are concerned, there's no video that goes with the church news. It's audio only, and that is a big downer for me. And because the church news's purpose is to, quote-unquote, build faith, any topics which might rock the boat, those are going to be avoided with a 10-foot pole. So you won't hear any gossip, no controversies, no critical opinions, only Sunday school approved answers. So when you go over there to listen to the church news, be sure to put on your rose-colored glasses if you're going to listen to a full-length episode.
I'm seeing the world through rose-colored glasses.
Mormon Land explores the contours and complexities of LDS news. It's sponsored by the Salt Lake Tribune, and it's hosted by award-winning religion writer Peggy Fletcher Stack and managing editor David Noyce. Here, let me play the trailer for you.
Welcome to Mormon Land, a podcast all about the news and culture of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
This podcast has professional editing, and it has top quality award-winning journalism. Now, not accepting the Mormon News Roundup, it's the only podcasts with journalists that I can trust. It has excellent guests with diverse opinions. Regarding cons, honestly, there are few cons to this excellent program other than the fact that it is in audio only and not in video. The programs are often interviews with authors or historians and not breaking news. Now, don't get me wrong, I love a good interview. I love a good history lesson. But as far as staying up on the day-to-day aspects or the week-by-week aspects of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Mormon Land won't give you the in-depth knowledge that I really am seeking.
I understand.
I've got two more Mormon-themed news sources that I'm going to cover on this podcast, so stay with me all the way to the end. Next up is the Mormon News Cast, launched in November of 2023. Here, let me play the trailer for you.
Welcome to the groundbreaking news program that delves into the heart of Mormonism, your weekly window into the unique intersection of news, history, and culture that resonates with the tapestry of Mormonism. So whether you're tuning in from the heart of Utah or joining us from around the world, your favorite news program starts now, where news meets insight and the stories of our faith unfold.
Now, this news program is hosted by Bill Reel, the CEO of Mormon Discussions, Inc., Radio Free Mormon, a Mormon podcasting legend, and Rebecca Biblioteca, who runs The Good Book Club and the Mormonish podcast. Now, it's important to note that John DeLynn originally appeared far more often, though he is still considered a host, though he rarely comes on. Now, when the Mormon Newscast launched in 2023, my YouTube views on the Mormon News Roundup were literally cut in half overnight. I can't prove a causation, but I do believe that there is a correlation.
Stop making excuses.
You know, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that viewers generally prefer the Mormon Newscast to the Mormon News Roundup. That's just a fact. And I suppose you could say that they're my number one competitor. So let's cover some of the pros of the Mormon Newscast. Rebecca Biblioteca is the best. I can literally listen to her talk about anything for hours. And that's one reason that she's a regular co-host on the Mormon News Roundup. Now, the Mormon Newscast is getting better and better with every episode. They haven't been around for that long, but they are getting better and better. If the Mormon Newscast had been around back when I founded the Mormon News Roundup in April of 2022, I doubt that this podcast would even exist. As far as the cons are concerned, I do wish that the Mormon Newscast would not have chosen to come in on Monday nights in direct opposition to the Mormon News Roundup, because we release new episodes of the Mormon News Roundup every Sunday and Monday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I really wish they would have chosen a different time, especially considering how small this community is. And the format that they chose is awfully similar to the Mormon News Roundup. You know, I do wonder.
You think Steve Carell did it all? Oh, he's brilliant, isn't he, Steve Carell? He's amazing as the bumbling office manager. Where does he get his ideas from? Let's pay.
Both Bill Reel and John DeLynn have admitted that they don't watch General Conference, and for me, that's a surprising admission. Here, let me play this clip for you.
I mentioned on an earlier episode I did with Nemo that I watched almost one entire session of General Conference. So I'm basically a fifth as resolute and as strong as you are.
It's not easy, is it?
No, it's not.
It's a dirty business, but somebody's got to do it.
But I did watch the morning Sunday session, and I actually felt like the first 4 or 5 talks were quite positive, quite pleasant. And it wasn't until Oak's talk that I decided to leave early and take my mom out to lunch.
I do wonder how you can cover LDS related news and not watch General Conference, which literally generates more LDS related news in those 4 days than any other time of the year. I just don't know how that works. Let me know in the comments what I'm missing, but I prefer to gain my news from people who will watch General Conference with a microscope and pull out the juicy nuggets for me. That's how I approach things.
That makes sense.
And more than once on the Mormon Newscast, I've heard hosts say that they did not read the articles before they came on. That's the same thing that we heard from This Week in Mormons. I want my hosts to read the articles thoroughly and have considered every single aspect. A couple of other cons. There's some inside jokes that take place on the Mormon Newscast that just go right over my head. I don't know if I'm just not smart enough to understand them or if I'm just not in the know, but I kind of want to be in on the jokes, and I really don't like it when I don't know what the inside jokes are.
You remember the show Zoom?
I
think it was
love
on
Zoom.
PBS.
We're gonna zoom. Yep.
Yes. Do you remember
Come
Zoom
on,
Talk?
give it a try. Yeah, you watched
Me and
it.
Mark Zapala would talk Zoom Talk on the back of the school bus, and nobody else could understand us. I'll give you an example if you want. Okay. Hi, bye, Fribbins. Bibis, Ibis, Bamban, Alban, Klibif, Waban, Tubu, 3B, Abba, Splabbit.
What the hell?
Dibis, Ibis, Maban, Alban, Klibif. Dibis, Ibis, Maban, Alban, Klibif. This is Man on Cliff. Waban, Tubu, 3B. 1, 2, 3. Ah, Splabbit. Ah, Splabbit.
What are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
All joking aside, I do acknowledge that the Mormon Newscast gets about 4 times as many views per episode as the Mormon News Roundup, and there's definitely a reason for that. Let me play a high-quality clip of theirs, and you can definitely see the difference between the Mormon Newscast and the Mormon News Roundup.
I hear this one cookie. That's kind of what you sounded like right there.
Cookie. C is for cookie. It's good enough for me. C is for good. Okay.
Please,
Cookie,
one of our viewers
cookie,
and
cookie
listeners,
starts
do it
with C.
right now, please.
Cookie, cookie starts with C.
What is happening?
Quality news reporting. Let's finish up with a Mormon news program that's kind of on the periphery. It's Mormon Stories. Now, this isn't a program that's totally dedicated to LDS news, but it's probably the biggest channel which occasionally or sometimes covers Mormon news. Founded in 2005, Mormon Stories podcast is the longest running and most popular Mormon themed podcast. Hosted by Dr. John Dehlin, Mormon Stories podcast seeks to understand, explore, challenge, and improve the Mormon experience through stories. You know, there's a lot of pros to Mormon Stories. They provide in-depth coverage, and I do mean in-depth. They have high production value and high production guests. It's a really slick operation, and they have an established track record of hundreds upon hundreds of Mormon-related podcasts with a huge audience. You know, Mormon Stories tried to launch a dedicated news show in 2023 with Patrick Mason and Dr. Jana Reese, but it only lasted a couple of episodes. As far as the cons are concerned, you know, most of the episodes for me that cover the news, they're just too long. And I think that John Dehlin is really much more of a people person than he is a newsman. The live episodes often contain small production issues and minor StreamYard transition lag. And according to my wife, and I think it's accurate, the tone of the show can occasionally be harsh. In conclusion, if you're into LDS news, I think the Mormon News Roundup is the best program around. That's a biased opinion to be sure, but since I am a postmodern relativist, it's the best I can offer. As we have discussed, there's many programs out there which cover church news related content, and I think I covered all of the shows that are related to LDS news. Let me know if I left anyone off of the list, and let me know your favorite source for Mormon news. Thanks so much to our Patreon supporters and YouTube members. Without you, this podcast just wouldn't be the same. If you enjoy this content and have some means, please consider making a donation on our Patreon. We release new episodes of the Mormon News Roundup every Sunday and Monday nights at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you come on over to YouTube at that time, you can interact with your humble hosts in the live chat. I want to give a shout out to Weird Alma on bandcamp.com for this episode's music. Thanks so much for ruminating with me on the great and spacious beehive. Always think celestial, and remember, no one hallowed hand can stop this podcast from progressing.
When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.
Satan. Cookie starts with C.